Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Joe San Diego here, along with Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast, Ben Schneider from the Ben Schneider channel, and Jackson Lambros from the Outlap Media. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to us. Thank you so much to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark Robin and David, plus Matthew, the newest one. His name's in gold. If you want your name in gold, subscribe to us on Patreon, invest in us each and every month. That'll help us get to the racetrack more frequently for 2024. And you can do a super chat, buy me a coffee as well. And if you're not watching us live, you can still, through the super chat, the little thanks button. Definitely, we appreciate it, and especially we appreciate all of us, the team here at the Grid Network. Great team here. We encourage everyone to buy a cup of coffee, super chat, and make it out to a particular person from the Grid Network team. Alex, we got to start with Formula One. They sort through this entire weekend schedule off with the Japanese race, Japanese Grand Prix. A lot of people were excited about it, especially after what happened in Singapore. But it seemed like we're just back to what Formula One was before Singapore.
That's right, Joe. We're pretty much back to reality in Formula One as Max Verstappen won the Japanese Grand Prix, meaning most everyone here gained Pecco winner points. You can watch Grid Live Pre-Race After Dark episode to find out who did not get points. And no one got 7th place right. We were close. I got Alonso. I picked Alonso for that. Josh picked Alonso. One spot off for that.
We encourage you to watch that episode. We need to normalize picking 7th place. It's just...
I'm saying.
Everyone knows who's going to win. Saying. No one knows who's going to pick 7th.
Exactly. I had Alonso. He finished 8th. It was really close, but... we encourage you to watch that episode. It was so much fun, guys. Like, we just had a blast with Josh as well. And his internet going out was a lot of fun. But it's back to business for Max Verstappen as he continues to control the World Drivers' Championship. Only he and his teammate Sergio Perez remain in the championship hunt. Perez, however, did not really look like a championship contender in Suzuka. He broke his front wing twice. He got a penalty. He got the car damaged. He retired and was nowhere near Max Verstappen. Just days after it was announced that Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo are going to Red Bull's AlphaTauri, he had a day like this. Perez is 33 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton, 180 up on the line. Could Perez lose second place to Hamilton at this pace? Isha, what do you think?
Alex, I think it's actually very possible. I was looking at how many points Hamilton would have to score, and to be honest, if Perez keeps up what's been going on the last 2 races, and Hamilton scores about 5th place or 6th place or higher in the rest of the 6 remaining races, I believe, he could very well take the second spot from Sergio Perez. But I think all of this more depends on Checo's performance than Hamilton's, because he is in that Red Bull, but the past 2-3 races have been pretty hard for him. So if he improves, and brings back the domination that we've seen from the Red Bulls, then Hamilton won't be able to take the spot from him. But otherwise, he could definitely take that second position if he scores like 6th or better in the remaining races.
I don't even know if he has to do that. I think we're going to talk about it later in this segment here. But the Red Bull, like you said, Isha, is so far ahead of the rest of the pack, whereas the Mercedes right now has to compete with the Ferraris and the McLarens and one of the Aston Martins, I suppose. Again, we'll get to that a little bit later. But I just feel like there's so much competition, including from Lewis Hamilton's own teammate, George Russell, that it's going to be harder for him to maximize that performance every weekend. Whereas if Checo can just go out and not do what he did this weekend and just have a relatively clean race and finish 2nd or 3rd, get on the podium, that's all he needs to do. He still has a full race, more than a full race over Lewis Hamilton there for the second place battle. We can see there on the screen. I know we say that he's still in the championship hunt mathematically. We all know it's only a matter of time before Max Verstappen becomes a triple world champion here. But I think that as long as Checo can avoid having absolute disasters like he had this weekend, and believe me, this weekend was an absolute disaster, but as long as he can avoid having too many of those in these last 6 races here, I think he'll be able to hang on to second place in the standings.
Yeah, Ben, I totally agree. And I think it's just got to be putting faith in the car. He's just one of the 3 now drivers to have won this season. And I think just if he just puts his foot forward in the right positions for the rest of the season, it's not going to be an issue. The real question is, will it be Hamilton who's going to be necessarily a threat to him? And I struggle to think Mercedes has a competitive enough package to bring the fight. You look at Ferrari, who's maybe been able to recover strategically, have been putting on more and more consistent performances. And I think absolutely Carlos Sainz especially has the biggest chance of maybe taking that spot from Checo. You look at Fernando Alonso and say maybe, but you see his result this weekend as we see their 8th this weekend, just a team that was consistently in the podium fight this season at the start, but now back points. So I think if anyone, it's going to be one of the Ferraris.
Yeah, and we have a comment in the chat room. They predicted a 16.7 second win, but they didn't win anything. They didn't lose any sleep over this race. Watched him lead into turn 1 and fell asleep. I was right there with you. I slept through this race. I was sleeping. I did not want to stay up for that. But then they said they woke up and they were talking about Checo going out for nothing since he was 15 or 19 laps down. They snoozed through it. I don't blame you. I checked out the highlights. It seemed like nothing too crazy happened besides what happened with Perez. But besides Verstappen and Perez, we also have the McLaren drivers. This was pretty exciting in my opinion. You had both drivers on the podium with Lando Norris leading Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri's a rookie, by the way. I just find this astounding what he's able to do this year. And McLaren is in firm control of 5th place in this championship, and they have their sights set on 4th place, which is held on by Aston Martin. McLaren is only 49 points behind Aston Martin, and Piastri has overtaken Lance Stroll in the driver's standings. In the last 5 races, Lance Stroll has 1 points finished compared to Piastri's 3, including the podium. So if McLaren overtakes Aston Martin, does it become harder to ignore Lance Stroll not really performing at Aston Martin? Ben, what do you think?
Nope, because Lawrence Stroll owns the team. It's as simple as that. This is the Formula One version of Paul Menard, except Paul Menard actually won a race once upon a time. Look, nothing against Lance Stroll. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but it's so clear at this point that he's not on the level of a Fernando Alonso or a World Championship caliber driver. You only need to look at the gap in the point standings. It's only become more apparent since the summer break. I don't know, maybe he needs to go out and break both of his wrists again. I say that only in jest, but it did seem like he got off to a great start to the year after he broke both of his wrists and barely made the start of a season. And those were his best drives of the year. I mean, since the summer break, he's been absolutely nowhere. And it certainly shows and is reflected in the standings here. Now, in terms of McLaren, can they catch Aston Martin here? They only have a few races left to do it. They're certainly on a better pace to be able to do it. And they have 2 cars regularly finishing up in the points compared to Aston Martin only having Fernando Alonso. It looks like he's lost a little bit of pace from the start of the year. But I just feel like that gap that Aston Martin built up. I mean, I saw the tweet from ESPN F1, I think, putting it out. I think they finished, 17th and 20th in Bahrain, and now they're scoring a double podium finish. It's just been a complete turnaround for McLaren, and it's been great to see for that team, but I just don't know if there's enough time left to overtake Aston Martin for P4 and the Constructors. Will every track suit their car enough to the point where they can perform like this? How many points is Fernando Alonso going to score? I don't know. It's going to be very close and come down to checker flag at Abu Dhabi, but I don't know that it's a sure thing or guarantee, even with Lance Stroll not really doing much of anything at the moment.
Ben, no matter how this career ends up, I think you gotta walk away with knowing that Lance Stroll's had to have had one of the most interesting careers in F1. And I just say that because it seemed like for such a time he was proving how viable pay drivers can be competitively. In the later William days, in Force India, before it was Racing Point, was genuinely sticking it up to his teammates. And it's just really seemed like the big turning point here was Fernando Alonso joining this Aston Martin outfit. And it does by day become harder to ignore him. And I think we talk about McLaren potentially overtaking them in the championship. I think it's a matter of how much does McLaren genuinely want this. We're at this time of the season now where obviously some of the more front runners like McLaren, like Mercedes, like Red Bull are maybe backing out and putting their efforts maybe not towards current dev, but let's start focusing on next year's car. So I think it's a matter of how much McLaren really wants to take on Aston Martin and how much Aston wants to put funding into R&D to defend that position.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you both here. If we're looking specifically at the second half of the question, is it harder to ignore Stroll if McLaren overtakes Aston Martin? I don't think it's going to make it harder to ignore him because it's already pretty hard to ignore his poor performances so far, unless you're his dad, Lawrence Stroll. who, to be honest, I don't know how he's sacrificing Aston Martin, like the whole team, over his son, because Aston Martin right now really is just riding on Fernando Alonso's back. He's the only one who's bringing in any points or getting them further in the constructor standings. And if McLaren does overtake them, then I don't think that it's going to make much of a difference looking at Lance Stroll and, Lawrence Stroll's decision of, whether keeping him in the team or taking him out, because he is his father. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to be a part of the team. And I think that McLaren is in the position to overtake Aston Martin because, as we've seen in the past few races, as we saw today, even with the double podium, the upgrades that they've brought, they've been doing an incredible job. So I just think that even now it's hard to see Lance Stroll and what he's doing for the team, which is really not much. And I think that Aston Martin, the best decision they can make at this point is to leave him and to take on someone who's more equal to Fernando Alonso's talent and who's, pulling their weight in bringing points to the team.
And Isha, if I can chime in here. Sorry, I'll just chime in here with a couple more things real quick here. I will say this about Lance Stroll. I'll never forget that unbelievable podium he took his rookie season in 2017 in Baku in that Williams.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
A pole position to Turkey in 2020. I mean, he has had his moments. Let's give credit where it's due. But over the course of a full season, there is no debate in terms of who the senior driver is at Aston Martin pulling in all the points. But again, to your point, Isha, as well, Fernando Alonso is 42 years old. How many years does he realistically have left that he would be able, regardless of whether or not he wants to stay in Formula One, to be able to carry the team on his back in this way? And you've got Felipe Drugovich, the reigning F2 champion, stuck in a reserve role at this team. It does feel like there's a dynamic there that isn't great for the ladder system to get to Formula One.
Yeah, Ben, and I'm going to jump on this really quick. I know we were backing up here, but we were talking about this last night. It's a matter of almost how a lot of people see Graham Rahal in IndyCar. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when I'm going to step out of the car and kind of take in Dad's role and potentially go and run this team. Or as our friend Josh Burch mentioned, guy has tennis as a hobby, might go pro there. He's got other avenues.
And even in tennis, he'll have to worry about his wrist there, too. So that's going to be something to watch out for there. So we have some comments in the chat room. Verstappen is now on 400 points exact and will have 6 full feature races and 3 sprint races remaining. The man is going to score over 500 points by the end of the season. That's crazy.
Has anyone done that? Is the real question.
I'm not sure. And Verstappen 400 versus Mercedes as a whole having 305. Max is only 5 points short from single-handedly outscoring Mercedes by 100 on his own. That's crazy. Thanks
guys,
for those stats right there.
Do the math real quick. What's 25 times 20?
Do 500.
500. Right. There you go. That's 20. I know we've got the sprint races now, and there's a point for the fastest lap, but that's basically 20 wins. Now, Max isn't quite there yet. And like I said, he's picked up bonus. There's bonus points available now and everything. But, I mean, you want to talk about domination and, 500 points in the season. If a constructor can get 500 points, usually that's enough to win the Constructors. It's just incredible.
For the viewers, current record for most single season points. Last year, Max with 454.
There you go.
Crazy. Very crazy. And now, while we just talked about some teammates there and some team situations with like Aston Martin, the McLaren drivers left pretty happy with their podium finishes, but some teammates were not very happy with each other, including the Mercedes drivers, as we just kind of touched on. They raced each other pretty hard and nearly collided more than once. Of the 2 AlphaTauri drivers, Liam Lawson was aggressive on Yuki Tsunoda when he had a poor start. So Jackson, do you believe Mercedes were just racing really hard while Liam Lawson was just trying to make a point AlphaTauri, as he was announced he would not be a full-time driver for them, he would just be a reserve driver next year?
It's a really, really interesting position right now, I think, in the Red Bull camp, just because you kind of feel like Checo might be on ice with where he's at on Red Bull right now. And I think it's a very safe move for AlphaTauri, but it feels like a repetition of just so many drivers that we've seen where you have a reigning F2 champ sitting 1-2 years like Oscar Piastri waiting to get into F1. And it's just, these guys aren't going to get any younger, right? It's a difficult choice, but I almost think that this is almost banking on something happening to Checo and either Danny or Yuki making that move up to Red Bull. That's totally tinfoil helmet on for me, but crazier things have happened in silly season for Formula One, guys.
Yeah, I agree with Jackson here, but I think that with Lawson's performance today, he was trying to make a point to AlphaTauri, but then also in one of the post-race interviews, he didn't seem to be gloating or to seem too excited about the fact that he had just outperformed Yuki Tsunoda, which might be because, he's trying not to make it seem like a big deal, because we clearly saw that Yuki Tsunoda was upset afterwards, but I think that Liam Lawson's definitely going to be in the mix, and Red Bull's definitely going to be taking a look at him, especially with Sergio Perez and the performances he's shown us in the last 2 races. If he keeps this up, then I think he's definitely going to be out of a contract next season, and Liam Lawson might be the driver that they're looking towards, or someone else. But coming back to the first half of the question, Mercedes and how the 2 drivers were racing today, it reminded me a little bit of the performances that we saw from Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, the 2 Ferraris at Monza, where I was surprised that the race strategists and the team principal were allowing them to do that, because it could have been dangerous at a few points, as you mentioned, Alex. And I believe at one point we even saw Lewis Hamilton leave George Russell no space, so he did have to go off the track. And I just feel like the battle between them at some points did seem a little unnecessary. And as George Russell stated in one of the radio comms, he did say that, are they trying to race each other or the other teams at this point? So I think that that's probably something that they did have a conversation about afterwards. And I feel like the whole battle at some points was a little bit unnecessary.
And now we have another comment here in the chat room. Max Verstappen is on another planet. What a driver. A spectacular job for McLaren in Japan. I totally agree on the McLaren comment. I'm just so impressed with Oscar Piastri. Every week, it just feels like he's outperforming. And now, let's talk about some other drivers in this race that DNF'd, unfortunately. Valtteri Bottas, Sergio Perez, twice, I heard. Lance Stroll, Logan Sargent, and Alex Albon. This was the first truly bad weekend for Williams this season, with Albon in trouble early with the first lap contact. Zhou Guanyu got damaged but finished 13th, ahead of both Haas drivers. Alfa Romeo was looking forward to this race after a dreadful Singapore weekend, and they have the same driver lineup next year. Can they improve and be further up the front next year? Isha, what do you think?
Alex, I think the answer to this is a quick one. I think that Alfa Romeo can only improve if they really, really bring some upgrades to their car and change their car around for next season, because, as you mentioned, they have the same driver lineup, and the drivers, it's a little bit hard to tell where they're at right now, because the season that they've had has been pretty mixed, and they haven't been scoring the most points either. So I think that unless they bring a whole new car next season or some really impressive upgrades, as we saw with the McLaren, that they're not going to be much further up next year.
Isha, it's another interesting thing, because they're kind of in that same camp of Aston Martin, where they had very, very strong results start of the season, not quite to the podium level, but were up fighting for top 5s and just kind of fell back as the season went on. And I think the real important question from this, Alex, is we look at a lot of these retirements from this weekend, and it's kind of a lot of guys being passengers. Bottas just gets binned by Logan Sargent. Albon goes flying after just being squeezed into turn 1. Lance Stroll, mechanical failure. Albon technically as well for a mechanical failure. You look at the 2 guys that really did mess up, and it's the guys that we've already talked about this weekend for being in hot water, and that's Logan Sargent and Sergio Perez, who, Checo went through, 2 front wings, which that's a stat I want to find out. Who's gone through the most F1 or front wings in a single weekend? But the big one for me was Logan Sargent just locks up into the hairpin, loses it on his own, and collects Bottas, ends his race with him. And I think I was saying it last night, guys. He's a dude that needed one more year in Formula 2 at least, and just was a marketing move to get him in that seat, and just wasn't ready.
I'm going to see if we'll talk more about this on the Encore show tomorrow. We've got a lighter week with the series that we usually cover, so we'll probably do an open segment or 2. But I just want to say this about Logan Sargent. I always try to remain as objective as possible on these shows, but the reality is people understand where I've been the last several years on the importance of, during this boom that Formula One's experiencing here in the States, the importance of having an American driver on the grid. So I was excited to see Logan Sargent get that promotion this year. Jackson, I'm with you. I think in a perfect world, probably would have spent another year in Formula 2, but he had the super license points. He had the opportunity. I think the only argument that he has is, look, you gave me this seat with the idea that year one was going to be the year to learn the car, to learn Formula One. Let's see what you can do in year two. That's where you're going to be judged a little bit more harshly here. To not get that year two, I think would be a little bit of a disappointment. But at the same time, it's impossible to ignore what Liam Lawson is doing in this AlphaTauri right now, filling in. It would be kind of ironic if he took the Williams seat, because then I think Williams just becomes the third Red Bull team with Alex Albon being there as well.
Do not even mention that, dear God.
I mean, yeah, that's where I am right now. If we're going to look at this objectively, obviously, if I'm going to allow myself to pull for one driver, it's going to be the American driver on the grid, whether it's Logan Sargent or Colton Herta or whoever it is, just for the sake of what it means for the sport here in this country. But when you look at it objectively, it is very, very difficult to make the case for Logan Sargent having that seat over a guy like Liam Lawson or a guy like Mick Schumacher, who's still waiting for another opportunity. I know he's probably going to be doing some WEC races next year. I already mentioned Felipe Drugovich, the reigning F2 champion, who is stuck in a reserve role this year. So, it's when he has weekends like this, when he has performances like this, it gets very difficult to justify giving him a second season in that car. But that was kind of the original intention when he first signed this deal. So I understand both sides of it, but I would say at this point in their careers, Liam Lawson should be in that AlphaTauri seat. I hope Daniel Ricciardo can come back before the end of the year and put in some strong performances, and we'll see what he can do next year. But it's going to be a crime if he's not on the grid in 2024. I'll tell you that much.
Ben, I'll say this: the season Sargent's having right now is coming down to two really, really big factors, results-wise and opinion-wise. One, Williams is still struggling to be on that level of competitiveness that they've had decades ago. But I think the big issue is we're witnessing one of the most talented rookie classes in Oscar Piastri and Liam Lawson that I think we've seen in years, and as well as some fantastic drives from Alex Albon, who's just been kind of used to getting the most out of, we'll say, not front running cars after his time with with Toro Rosso. But it's just a lot of different factors. And as much as I think he came in too early, I absolutely agree with you, Ben. And I think he does genuinely deserve at least half of the next year. Let halfway of next year be the deciding point for his career.
Yeah, well, that would be Scott Speed, right? Got a full year in 06 and then half the season in 07 before. I mean, the Red Bull program really is boom or bust. It's
it is, man.
Sebastian Vettel, it's bust if you're Sebastian Bourdais or Scott Speed for that matter. But the last full-time American in Formula One, it'd be interesting to see if they give Sargent another half year, and then maybe that's his legacy as well. But it's been still hard to believe. It's been 30 years since an American scored a point in Formula One. I would at least hope that Sargent can experience that before his time at Williams is up, whenever that may be, because Scott Speed would have scored points if we had the current system. His best finish was 9th in that Toro Rosso. Sargent's best is 11th, so both of them so close. But that's the situation right now.
Still, what, 5-6 races to go? Can happen.
6, right? Yeah,
I think so.
Quick follow-up question for you guys on Logan Sargent. Do you guys think he kind of got pushed up because the Andretti deal didn't end up happening?
Ooh. I got an answer here.
Curious.
Go ahead, Jackson. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think for sure that might have been a little bit of an influence, but I think it's just overall a surge of a desire for American competitors in Formula One. I don't think it was necessarily apples to apples, and I think
makes sense.
This is at least what I'm thinking, but if I'm Michael Andretti and I'm trying to get into Formula One, I'm picking the two best guys from IndyCar right now, and I'm signing them a massive contract to go and try Formula One. But I really do think it's more of bringing IndyCar talent over Andretti's mission than necessarily bringing American talent. But that's just me.
I don't love doing shameless plugs all the time, but I've written a couple of op-eds for Brock Beard at Last Card on Info on the subject of American drivers in Formula One and does the sport actually want them and all that stuff. One of the points I made in one of my recent pieces, I think it was in January, was that I think, ironically, when you look at how the seats all played out, Colton Herta not getting that super license exemption is really what opened up that Williams seat for Logan Sargent.
Yeah.
That seat instead went to Nick DeVries, who had that great run at Monza in that Williams last year, where he did score a couple of points. And then with DeVries not taking the Williams seat occupied by Latifi, who was the next obvious promotion to go into that seat was Logan Sargent. So I think had Colton Herta been given that exemption, I don't know that Logan Sargent would have made it on the grid this on the grid this year, and he probably gets another year in F2, like you were mentioning, Jackson. And ultimately, for the long-term development of Logan Sargent, I think that would have been better. But we are where we are now.
All right, now next weekend for F1, they're in Qatar and they have a sprint race that week. Verstappen could wrap up the Drivers' Championship depending on what happens between him and his teammate Perez. And now another question here. Isha, we'll start with you this time. Should the FIA prepare for crowning the champion next weekend? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what Ben and Jackson are going to say about this, but I definitely think so. I mean, in the past few weeks, we've asked similar questions, and I've doubted Max Verstappen in the past, but he's proved himself over multiple times, as we saw him come back from last weekend. You know, if we exclude that, the rest of the season, he's definitely proved himself multiple times over. So I think that he's definitely going to be the champion of 2023, and I think that there's no point pushing it off anymore. You know, they might as well just start the preparations next race weekend.
You know, these sprint races drive me crazy. The math used to be so simple. There's 6 races left. You got to be 150 points clear or 151 without the tiebreaker or whatever. I don't know off the top of my head even how many. I think we have 1 or 2 sprint races left, and then obviously the fastest lap bonus points kick in. I don't know what the magic number is exactly with 6 races to go, but if we can pull the point standings back up, what is it, 177 right now, the gap to Pecco? There we go. Yeah, so that's basically 7 race wins with a couple of fastest laps as well. And we've got 6 races left. It's a formality at this point. I don't know. I mean, I guess if Max DNFs and Pecco maximizes, his opportunities, then it just gets pushed back a race. But yeah, I mean, it's the championship's decided, guys. Let's start calling Max Verstappen the champion-elect. He's been the champion-elect for a while, and he thoroughly deserves it. 10 race wins in a row, 13 on the season, and breaking records left and right. Yeah, it's over. There's no debate at this point.
I got to agree with you, Ben. And I think the question is, if it's not Qatar, then when's it going to be? And I think, unfortunately, I really do think it's going to be Qatar. And I'm going to do a technical approach to this because I think we've learned a lot about the Red Bull car itself in these past 2 weekends. We know Singapore is very, very low speed, heavy reliance on mechanical grip. Wings can't do too much in those super narrow street corners, and kind of issues with getting the traction down with acceleration. You look at Suzuka, long, flowy, able to really, really lean on aerodynamic performance and just able to carry all that momentum. And if you look at Losail International, it's almost exactly, it's the exact flavors of Suzuka in a different color. Obviously not the exact same back and forth craziness of Suzuka. Nothing's ever going to be like Suzuka. But I genuinely think this is a car that's going to be tailor-made for victory here in Qatar, and I think Max is going to take it. Would be cool for it to be in the actual race, though, and not the sprint, but that's just me.
Well, Jackson, since you brought up Singapore, let me throw something else out there that I saw this week. Max Verstappen would have had a 9-race win streak last year if he hadn't lost Singapore. Of course, Pecco won Singapore last year, but it's been interesting to look at. That's kind of been his only Achilles heel in his entire career, you could say, but especially the last 2 years where they've had a dominant car. He just can't figure out Singapore. He's got everywhere else squared away, but that's the one race he can't win. It is
without a doubt one of the most physically challenging, most mentally challenging circuits just in the world. It's one of the longest street circuits in the world. It's consistently been described by drivers as one of the hardest races of the year. So even for a guy like Max, I don't blame him for struggling to bring home silverware.
So our next post-race show will be talking about crowning a champion in Formula One. And we only have 10 weekends left in the grid ranking. We'll have a lot to follow there. So Ben, now let's talk about MotoGP, their championship. It sounds like it just got blown wide open by Pecco Bagnaia blowing a podium finish.
Yeah, well, let's bring Joe Samaniego back in here for this one. The Indian Grand Prix going on as scheduled, despite all the issues we were talking about on Grid Tonight earlier this week. The visa issues, the issues with the track circuit, maybe not being suitable for racing, but all of that is in our rearview mirrors now because Pecco Bagnaia crashed out. There are now only 13 points between him and Jorge Martin. Marco Beschecchi's 44 points out of it, or out of a championship lead, so not out of a championship fight just yet, I should say. Bagnaia did not finish the race at Japan last year. That's the next race on the schedule this year. So, Joe, with this, do you agree that with this current situation, the championship's wide open now, or does Pecco Bagnaia, who has more wins than Jorge Martin, rebound from here and rebuild that distance in the championship fight?
The best person to answer that question will be Pecco Bagnaia, because it's going to be which Pecco Bagnaia are we going to get? Are we going to get the one that is going to be hard to beat, dominant, up towards the front, race after race, putting on a flawless performance like what we saw in the beginning part of the season? Then yeah, he's going to claim this championship easily. If we see what he did before when it was him versus Fabio Quartararo for the championship, and he would just win or crash out. He cannot afford to do that. With these sprint races, it is just too much to give up those valuable points, to be this close to it. One of the big things I think is you got to watch out for what happens in this and every race. You can't go to a sprint race thinking, I'm just going to give it up, take it easy into the next round. If you go there, screw up, you're in trouble. One of the big things for Pecco Bagnaia, he looked pretty solid today in the race until he crashed out. And that was the big thing. He just makes these mistakes. It just makes it where the team has to raise questions, because overall, when you look at the factory Ducati team, with Enea Bastianini having his problems, missing races, rumors that he may not be kept around, and then you have this going on with Pecco Bagnaia, it starts to wither away in the confidence of the team with the two riders. They have the best bike easily. Could he blow away another championship like he did to Quartararo and to a non-factory team, Jorge Martin? Jorge Martin will be overjoyed if he could get more and more closer to the championship. If he can enter that last race with a shot at the championship, I think he'll be beyond excited in what he could achieve this year entering the season. I don't think the championship was in the picture, but it has to go to, can Pecco Bagnaia handle pressure and deliver some good, solid performances like he's done in the past?
Well, Beschecky took the win with Martin behind, and in third place, this is not a typo or a mistake, Fabio Quartararo. It's been a long time since we talked about him being on the podium. We saw him up front with both Repsol Hondas and KTM, along with the familiar faces of Aprilia and, of course, Ducati. So, Joe, could this be a sign of some improvement from Honda and Yamaha as we enter Japan?
Potentially. I kept wondering with this race, was this because we're in a brand new circuit for all the teams? But you look, especially the long straightaways, those should have been easily big advantages for Ducati with their straight line speed. To see the Yamahas, to see the Hondas up towards the front, that was a huge surprise. And especially for Juan Mir, he has just had a dreadful season with the Honda team. Injuries, poor results. If he's not getting a good result, he's crashing out, injured again. To see him up towards the front, to think he was the 2020 world champion, I think he's only had one win since that championship season. This has to be a huge boost for that Honda team to feel good about the next upcoming races, because now it's off to Japan, and we're not going back to Europe until the last race of the year. I think this has to feel good that, hey, we're starting to get things together. If we could keep improving our bikes and improving onto Ducati, you could potentially see them on the points. We saw Marc Marquez on the podium for the sprint race. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for them. But Japan, we know Honda is usually good there, but Ducati has won there before. I think that'd be a good test for Honda. As for Yamaha, if they could score points again, or if Fabio Quartararo could again get a podium, then I think they got something really good and special. Especially, I'm going to say this, Australia, Phillips Head Island, that race, such a great race. That's where we saw Suzuki got their last win. That could be a very close race between Honda, you got the Yamahas, Ducatis, then Aprilia and KTM's in there. That could be the best race of the season in a couple of weeks' time.
We will look forward to that. In the meantime, let's bring Jackson and Alex back in to discuss the NASCAR race at Texas Motor Speedway.
Thanks very much, Ben. NASCAR, their only stop of the year at Texas Motor Speedway for the 400-mile race. William Byron now entering Talladega without a worry about his playoff standings and points, taking the win. The big storyline, though, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace crashed between the two of them with 20 laps to go in the race. Kyle was racing Bubba hard, got loose, and went hard into the outside of one. Two were fighting for the win, and not to enter Talladega with any insurance of entering the Roval. It's going to be a must-win in Charlotte. Burton said Kyle wrecked himself. Dale Jr. called it hard racing. Larson was out of the race, and because Bubba didn't win, Larson's 2 points above the cut line. 2 points below the cut line, Bubba Wallace. Larson was surprised he lost it so quickly, entering side by side with Bubba. Starting with you, Alex, do you agree this is not only hard racing, but playoff racing?
This was hard racing at its finest, as fine as you can get at Texas Motor Speedway at least. Like, this was a phenomenal restart won by Bubba Wallace to be able to maintain with Kyle Larson, who had, it seemed, the best car today. These were the two best cars this whole race, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace. But for Bubba Wallace to maintain his composure and not move at all on this restart was just so impressive to me. And I know the race didn't end the way that he would have liked, but to me, this was Bubba Wallace's best race, and I know he's going to get a lot of wrongful criticism out there because, you know, for unfair reasons, but this was fantastic racing, and it ended in an unfortunate way for Kyle Larson. But honestly, you had to be perfect right there, and Kyle Larson wasn't able to be perfect. It just snapped loose on him, and it's just something that happens sometimes when you're battling for the lead like this.
Well, against my better judgment, I'm scrolling through the Facebook comments right now. They're actually better than I was expecting, so take that for what it's worth. But I don't know if I would say it's his best race, Alex. I still think I would put Kansas last year at number one, only because he did lead a bunch of laps to close that race out and actually finished the deal and ended up parking into victory lane this year. In this race here at Texas, he wasn't able to close the deal, so I would say it's probably his second best race overall of his career. But I guess you can make that argument from start to finish because he started on the pole for this race. Michigan last year comes to mind as well when he got that pole, that track. But it was a great day overall for him. It looked like it was going to be a great day for Kyle Larson as well. But again, if you're blaming Bubba Wallace for this, you're either blind, you know nothing about racing, or you have an agenda. Just as if you're blaming Kyle Larson for this, for running out of talent. I mean, the guy's a Cup Series champion. I don't know what else to tell you on that front as well. I think this was just simply a racing incident. I know we love to assign blame, but believe it or not, those things do still exist. Racing incidents where nobody's at fault. It's just hard racing. Kyle Larson just got a little bit loose, and unfortunately, because of the way Texas Motor Speedway is designed, that was the end of his day.
Do we think that it's difficult in modern NASCAR with how rigid these cars are that every single racing incident, intentional or not, is kind of sending a message or might have intent behind it, guys?
It very well could. I think there's a lot of past things that have happened in the past couple of years, maybe this year as well, that there's just like, oh, well, if this happened, it's obviously intentional. And I think you can go back to Las Vegas last year with Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson as well. And again, I don't think that's the same kind of situation, but for a lot of people, they probably see it as that. You know what I mean? So I just think there's a bad precedent that's been out there, I think, for bad reasons. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't know. It's definitely an interesting topic, but it's a racing incident for me, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to open up old wounds too much, but these are the two worst possible drivers that could be involved in a controversial situation. And we saw that at Vegas last year because, again, for unfortunate reasons, all the political pundits start running with it when it's Bubba Wallace versus Kyle Larson. And, they, like I said last year, 999 times out of 1,000 when they try talking about the sport, they get it completely wrong. So I would hope that we don't see any of that this time. I would think that anybody with eyes that has even the slightest amount of knowledge about how this sport works can understand that nobody's at fault for this incident, at least not intentionally. I guess you could say Larson's at fault because he lost the car, but again, I think it was just a matter of the air getting underneath him and spinning him out. And again, the reconfiguration of this track is terrible, but we don't need to open up those old wounds either. We all know that. It's just hard racing and just playoff racing, like you mentioned as well, Jackson. That's what you have to do with this system in this situation at this point of the year.
We're going to put it as a Charles Leclerc racing incident. And speaking of F1, Adam Lemmerise with a great comment. I don't think Max V will win in Vegas. And I know he's meaning the F1 Grand Prix, but I wouldn't put Max out of a Cup car I wouldn't put that possibility. You never know, right? Let's talk about winners for NASCAR's Vegas race, potentially here. William Byron, great restart, took the lead from Bubba Wallace at the end there. Clean air was the big difference maker. Hadn't been up front almost all day and finally got to run up there. Now, Ben, do we think that his team can capitalize on this and spend the next 2 races focusing on Vegas to win there, secure a spot in the championship 4?
Yeah, well, again, the way the system works, the best possible race you can win is the opening race of a round, because then you basically have 2 free test sessions because, as I've said before on the show, the points don't matter. You've won a race, you've automatically advanced to the next round, and particularly, I guess, if you're going to a track type that's similar to races that you still have left in the postseason, it can be even more of an advantage there as well. I remember after Jeff Gordon scored that really emotional win at Martinsville in 2015, all the talk was, Texas is 1.5 miles, and then Homestead's 1.5 miles to end the year. You can bet that they're going all in on using this as basically nothing more than a glorified test session for the championship race at Homestead. So, that doesn't even get into the momentum that, the positive vibes that this brings to your team, winning a race and knowing that you don't have to, especially with Talladega and the Roval. You want to talk about sleepless nights. If you look at the playoff bracket right now, I think who has the most, I just had it up here with scrolling through NBC's Facebook page here. So Denny Hamlin's 37 up. Thank you for that, Joe. 37 up. He's getting caught up in the big one at Talladega away from going to the Roval basically on the cut line. Nobody's safe except the guy that won the race today. How well do you think William Byron's going to be able to sleep over the next 2 weekends?
With Talladega coming up and the Roval, you can't really do that. So yeah, this was the round I think you needed to win if you were just gonna feel safe. And that, honestly, that's kind of why I like this round, because it's all kind of the silly, stupid tracks all grouped together. And I like that it's early and not like the round of 8. That would have been a bad deal there. But I don't know. With William Byron, though, I've said this on my podcast before, I feel like he's just able to be stagnant right there at the end of races and show up and capitalize on others' mistakes. I just don't know if William Byron's going to be able to take this and go for a championship more so, because I just feel like he's not able to go and make his car better throughout a race. I've been saying that for a while now on the podcast, and I know he has 6 wins this year, but if you look at all of them, pretty much he's kind of just been there at the right time, or he just stays in the same spot. If he's running in the back, he doesn't get back up there. So with Byron, yeah, he's going to benefit from these 2 weeks, and he's going to be able to prep more, but I don't think it's necessarily going to help him win the championship or anything. I just don't see him as a championship favorite.
Regardless, he's a guy that's not going to have to worry about that. Let's talk about a couple of drivers that are going to have to worry about, debatably, 2 of the most chaotic races of the season here, Dega and the Roval. Kyle Busch spun out, hitting the outside wall in 1 and 2. Toe majored it into the pit lanes, finished 34th. End of the stage, MTJ spun out by Keselowski. Both of them kept going. Teammate Ty Gibbs hit Denny Hamlin on the pit road in a really weird incident. And Ryan Blaney caught up in the 11th caution, hit the turn 4 wall. Guys, are we surprised by so many of the playoff guys having this kind of trouble in Texas?
No, because this happens every year. This happens every year at Texas, and it happens every year in the playoffs. It's just kind of the usual thing. But in the Ty Gibbs and Denny Hamlin thing, that was weird because that didn't seem to actually hurt Denny Hamlin's car at all. I think it actually made his car better, which is really interesting. But I don't know. This just happens every year with the playoffs, so no. But I think it's also a product of you get so many guys in the playoffs. Over a fourth of the field is in this still? So, yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
What is it with Ty Gibbs and hitting people on pit road at Texas? This is 2 years in a row now.
Right.
One this year, maybe not as intentional this year, but I think he was just. But again, they were saying that he should have been closer to the outside of the outside lane of the pits there, and unfortunately his own teammate got caught up in it. But no, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by very much of anything in the sport anymore. But when you have a round that consists of Texas, Talladega, and the Charlotte Roval, I don't know what you expect. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you there, Alex. I cannot. You know where I stand on the system as a whole. But if we're going to have a system, a round of these 3 tracks back to back to back, it's just simply too chaotic for my liking. I'm not a huge fan of that, quirk in the schedule that we've got here. But no, this track is. I think they were saying it they were playing a montage, NBC was, in the pre-race show of all the different chaos and carnage and the Jeff Gordon and Keselowski incident from 2014, and goodness knows all the stuff that we saw there last year. We considered this the normal round, or the normal race in this round here was the Super Speedway and the chaos of the Charlotte Roval coming up. But I think it's just as much a wild card in many respects as those two races are. So, hardly surprised to see so many drivers run into something or another here at Texas Motor Speedway today.
I will say, regarding the playoffs, I do think you need a super speedway still. I know they're chaotic. I don't like it either, but I think you still need one in there. And the road course, I think you still need one in there. Maybe not all in the same round, I'm assuming is what you're more saying. Yeah.
That's just it. Yeah, okay. Exactly. If you're going to do a postseason, you need to have at least one of every track type in there. But again, I think to have Talladega in the same round as your road course, not a huge fan of that. And at least Talladega is not the cutoff race anymore. We can say that much at the very least. But you're going to do a road course. Again, we've had this discussion on the show before as well. But I think the Charlotte Roval has kind of overstayed its welcome in many respects. I don't think it was ever meant to be a permanent thing here. It was just kind of it was going to be something like all the fans want road course racing. Let's give them this to tide us over because we have to have these races here at these tracks for the next several years, and then we can introduce some more road courses in when the contracts come back up again. Well, we're there now. So especially with how the next gen cars racing, let's go back to the 1.5 miles for the fall race at Charlotte, but let's put an actual road course in the postseason to give us that schedule variety for the playoffs. That would be, and don't put it in the same round as the Super Speedway. That would be my ideal postseason schedule we have to have.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If they move Watkins Glen move it later in the season to round 1, maybe it goes where Kansas is and Kansas moves into the second round or something. That's where it used to be for years. And then Charlotte Roval's back on the oval and Talladega's still in the second round. You'd like that?
Yeah, that would be fair.
Better.
I hesitate to say I would like anything that has to do with the NASCAR playoffs, but in terms of
you'd like it better.
Having to do with what we have, yes, that would be. I would certainly take that over the schedule that we have now. No doubt about that.
I can agree with that.
Question from Evan King really quickly. Does Bubba have to win to advance? I don't believe so, but he definitely needs decent results here, guys.
Well, listen, like I said, nothing surprises me anymore. I would be very surprised if Bubba Wallace wins at the Charlotte Roval. And I know he's come a long way on the road courses over the last several years, but I don't see that happening. If he's going to win and advance, it's going to be at Talladega.
Wonder how Bubba's done at Talladega. Huh?
What was that, Jackson?
He has won there.
He's won there, albeit under funky circumstances, but he's won there. So,
and I think Bubba. He had a shot to win today, obviously, and I think everyone wanted to win today. And Talladega, that is probably his best shot. I would have said that before today as well. But again, Talladega, anyone can win there. So I don't think you can necessarily say, well, Bubba Wallace is just going to win Talladega in advance. So I don't know. He can keep doing the stage point thing they did in the first round, but I don't think that's going to be enough this time. I think he's going to have to get top 5.
Really go on
at Talladega. If he doesn't win Talladega, he's going to be top 5 or something. But then the Roval, I don't see him doing that. So maybe he does need to win Talladega. I don't know.
Well, here's the perspective for everybody. We were just talking about how many playoff drivers had some sort of issue today.
True.
Bubba Wallace won the pole, ran up front, picked up a couple stage points, and finished 3rd. And he's still below the cut line after this race because he didn't have the playoff points that carried over into this round. He started 12th out of 12 drivers. So, if he goes out and finishes 2nd in both stages and finishes 2nd in the race at Talladega, he'll have a nice points cushion. But again, the next race is the Charlotte Roval. Even if you're 30, 40 points up there, I don't think anything can be a guarantee going into that race if you're Bubba Wallace. So, absolutely. I don't think Talladega is a must-win. There's certainly a mathematical way for him to point his way through, but he would certainly be a lot more comfortable if he can pull off a win at Talladega.
Tech inspection complete and results are final, meaning Byron has the win, and Denny Hamlin, who through the fire and flames had a top 5 finish, 37 points above the cut line. And mind you, before the last few cautions, running at 3rd with a pretty beat up Toyota behind Kyle Larson and Jones. Guys, despite Byron taking the win, do we still think Denny might be the one to beat at Talladega?
I don't know that anybody's the one to beat at Talladega. It's so unpredictable and so much of a wild card. But, I felt this way in 2019, and obviously Kyle Busch still ended up winning the championship that year. But I just feel like sometimes when it's your year, it's your year. Denny Hamlin had his teammate run into him, take off half of his right side door on pit road today, and he still comes away with the top 5. I mean, come on, So I just feel like it's shaping up to be that 2019 feeling again, where if you're Denny Hamlin, you flat out tweeted earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Denny himself saying, "This is our year." I mean, you have a day like today, and you come away with the top 5 or 37 points up, which is by no means a guarantee. But we talk all the time about how great Hamlin is. In super speedway racing, he's a 3-time Daytona 500 champion for a reason. I think he's got to be one of the favorites. I don't think there is a favorite going into Talladega because of how wild it is, but he's going to be up there, no doubt, as long as he can stay out of trouble.
That's exactly the angle I was going to go with, because how do you get that kind of damage at mile-and-a-half oval and your car starts running better? Like you said, this just seems like it's Denny's year. He did say that. He did say that on Insta and Twitter and everything. I don't think he's necessarily the favorite to win at Talladega. I actually think that's the RFK cars, the 6 and 17. But Denny, I think he's still the guy to beat for this championship. He is, now that Larson especially now Larson's lower in the points, if Larson somehow misses, Denny Hamlin is by far the championship favorite.
Last big talking point.
RFK, though, and Brad especially, right? If they can...
Yep.
I mean, he's had so much success there as a driver at Talladega already. If that's where he gets his first win as a car owner, and to do it in the playoffs, and that would be great for them. I agree with you, Alex. They got to be favorites as well.
Last big talking point here. Super notable finish for the Stewart-Haas guys. Harvick in 6th, Briscoe in 10th, top 10 for both of them. Briscoe in 2nd at a certain point before the final caution came out. Guys, do we think this helps build confidence for both of those guys and for Harvick, no longer in the playoffs? Do we think he can maybe be more focused on getting wins without that kind of worry?
Yeah, I think for Briscoe in particular, he was running top 15, top 10 most of the day, and we have not seen that at all this year. So I think that's something they should be happy about, that whole organization. They should be proud of that and keep building upon whatever they found. For Kevin Harvick, I think he's just kind of ready for the year to be done, because he's been kind of doing these performances all year. I know he had a rough race at Bristol, just very uncharacteristic, and knocked him out of the playoffs, but I think for him, he's just kind of taken whatever he can get at this point. But for Briscoe and SHR as a whole, they should be very proud of this performance, I think.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I didn't realize Briscoe fell all the way to 10th. That's a little bit unfortunate, I think, for him, because I think he maybe even should have been a little bit higher there. But yeah, because like you guys were mentioning, he was running 2nd at that one point there. But nonetheless, still a great run for that team, and a great shot in the arm in terms of momentum based on where they've been this year. They have not had very many top 10 finishes to go home happy about. So great day for Stewart-Haas in all things considered, given how this year's gone for them. Of course, if this were 5 years ago, we'd probably be saying it was an average day for Stewart-Haas. But the way this year has gone, when you look past Kevin Harvick especially, I know the season's almost over at this point, but you got to take what you can get in terms of momentum right now. This is going to be huge for them, I think, in terms of their confidence going into the last few races this year.
Yep.
That's a wrap for NASCAR. Next race, we go to Talladega. 11 drivers will try to win and advance to the round of 8. 25 others still trying to get a win, since the probability of winning always high there. But with the chances of crashing, equally high chance of a really, really big one yet again. Talk about it all next week alongside MotoGP and the World Rally Championship. Till then, we've got a grid ranking update. Isha, what do we got?
Yeah, looking at grid ranking now, after today, where we only have 9 weekends of the grid ranking, and the final few left are known. Now, Max Verstappen continues to lead and control his destiny. If Verstappen fails to finish in the top 10 for the remaining races, his score can drop to 16.25, which means he will still finish ahead of all of the Formula E drivers. However, Alex Palou will be the new leader if that happens, and his score is finalized. So the question is, who can outscore Alex Palou? Now, in MotoGP, Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin are both mathematically in. There's no NASCAR driver, and in supercars, Brody Kostecki and Shane Van Gisbergen are the defending champions. Now, there's no WRC driver has left since the part-time performance of Sebastien Ogier has taken too many points away. So Jackson, Alex Palou had a 100% top 10 finish rate in IndyCar, 5 wins, only 7 finishes outside the podium. Does this level of dominance Palou had in IndyCar feel underappreciated?
It's the Max versus Alex argument that we've had for a while here, and in regular sports terms, would you rather have a sports team that absolutely dominates 100-0 every weekend, or would you want to have a team that kind of manages to find a comeback every single weekend? And I think as dominant as Max has been, Alex and that whole Chip Ganassi crew has just been someone who through the chaos has just somehow found ways to win out of seemingly nowhere. It's that kind of Chip Ganassi gene that Scott Dixon and Mike Hull have had for so long, and I think it's finally starting to rub off on Alex. And don't get me wrong, both of these guys, regardless, are totally going to have a celebration worth, a season worth celebrating. But it's always hard to fully appreciate IndyCar the same way that F1 is appreciated, because for so long it's considered the MLS of open wheel racing, the retirement league. And I really, really do think, Alex, that we're now finally starting to show people it's so much more.
I totally agree. And I feel like there's a lot of factors that might go into why this kind of season for Alex Palou is underappreciated. I mean, you have the contract drama, you have the TV schedule is very spaced out. People might forget about the series here and there. I get it. But in like 5-10 years, people are going to look back on this season and be like, oh my gosh, that happened.
Full timer.
Like, wow, this is like, it's unbelievable. Like, his worst finish was 8th, if I'm not mistaken, and it happened twice. One was at Iowa, and I forget where the other one was, but just remarkable. Like, we're going to be looking back at this and just thinking like, wow, we were lucky to see that. Like, it might not have been the most exciting thing to watch sometimes, but like, this guy, Alex Palou, he's something special for sure.
A guy who's finished every single race this year, 99% of the laps, the only exception there being a lap down from the leader in Iowa. I struggle to think of a driver who's consistently finished in the top 10 every single race in IndyCar, Isha.
Yeah, definitely. And Jackson, you mentioned Max Verstappen before. With Verstappen over a second faster than everyone in Japan, despite McLaren's upgrades and the perfect season gone, Red Bull still seems way ahead of the competition. Now, Lewis Hamilton did say that he fears that Mercedes won't be able to catch up to Red Bull in 2024. And we know that Mercedes has been seen as the toughest competitor for Red Bull so far. But lately, McLaren looks fast and Ferrari has that win. So, do you guys think Hamilton is saying this to hide something that Mercedes may have? Or could the Silver Arrows be in trouble and be third or fourth best behind the McLaren and the Ferrari?
We know Mercedes is the team that likes to cook up some maniacal things technologically. We talk about the DAS, the moving steering wheel and caster system a couple of years ago. And I think we're seeing maybe this liftoff of performance here in these last couple of races, because I truly believe they are all chips in on 2024 in their car.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lewis Hamilton's kind of known for kind of hyping up something that's not exactly true, because he said in the car before, oh, my tires are dead, and then he lays down fastest lap and he's fine. Like, he's done that kind of thing before. I don't know if necessarily he's doing that here. He might be. But, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I would like to see Mercedes be more competitive again. I hate, this is weird to say, but I'd like to see Lewis Hamilton win one more time. Like, that's weird to say in itself, but that'd be really cool. I think it'll happen too. But still, it's like, are we going to see it happen? Like, I hope so, but we'll have to wait and see.
I still remember, I think it was after he won his, after he won his third championship, Lewis Hamilton was being interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he said, I want to do this until I'm 37. And now he's, 37, 38, and he's, there are rumors that maybe he's got another 5 years left to give to this sport. So clearly he had a change of heart somewhere along there. If he does end up staying that long, again, I think it's inevitable. Mercedes, are a good enough team with a good enough car that there will be the right combination one of those days. So at least so much as win one more race. But in terms of being able to fight for an 8th world championship, like we were saying at the top of the show, McLaren's back on the up. Ferrari, always seems to bring a fast car, and we wonder if this is finally going to be the year they break through, and then they, usually self-destruct, unfortunately. But and then you got Red Bull, obviously, who look just absolutely unstoppable right now. So again, I know Lewis has faith in his team that they can take these next 6 months or whatever it's going to be and focus on 24 and try to develop a worthy challenger to Red Bull. But as he said, it's going to be very difficult to do so because they are just so far and away the most dominant team that we've seen in many, many years. At the very least, possibly ever. Nobody's ever won 10 races in a row. Nobody's ever, achieved a perfect season, which we all thought might be on the cards potentially until Singapore. I mean, it's just been absolutely unbelievable what that team has been able to do. But then again, so was what Mercedes did for that 8-year stretch from 14 to 21, where they never lost to constructors, and they only lost one of the drivers at the very end there. So we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, definitely, guys. And, Alex, as you mentioned, I think this is a hard question to answer because on one hand, Hamilton could be hiding something, and, Mercedes might have some insane new technology, as I think Jackson mentioned, that they might pull next season. But I think that the most important question here is not who's going to be second, third, or fourth spot, because we know it's most likely going to be either the Mercedes, Ferrari, or McLarens that are in that second to fourth place finishing for next season. But who's going to be first? Is it going to stay Red Bull? I think that with the past 3 or so seasons that we've seen, I think that's most likely what's going to happen. But I think that the goal right now for everyone should be to try to beat Red Bull rather than, settling for that second or third or fourth place finish.
And I think that's what everyone wants to do, Isha. It's just the issue is with just this dominance on these new regulations we've seen from Red Bull in the past 2 years, they've already set themselves up to kind of coast to the finish of each season and just already kind of go 50-50 on focusing for the next year. And I know that the technical innovation is what makes this sport so exciting. And I love it as much as anyone else, but especially in this century, we've had just such a issue of strings of championships from Schumacher to Vettel to Hamilton and now to what seemingly is going to be Max. Now, I don't want to say that's going to be forever. Adrian Newey said himself, I don't totally quote me on this, but Newey said he doesn't want to be around too much longer. Max says he doesn't just want to stay here and win, and the record isn't something that's a concern for him. So I don't know. It's for sure a problem, but it's very much looking like this is going to be another era of Red Bull domination, as much as I really don't want to say that.
I mean, Max could say that, but what is he signed through? I think 28 or something stupid, ridiculous like that in terms of a commitment to this team. I mean, the second he no longer has that dominant car, he's going to be wishing that he was back to the glory days of 2022 and 2023. So I don't know. I've never really bought those comments from him. I know exactly what you're talking about, Jackson, but I think Max is going to be in the sport for a long time. And I think I said on Twitter this morning, if Max wins out, he'll have 54 wins by the end of the year. He'll pass Vettel for third all time. I think Lewis and Michael need to start counting. Because
can I throw you a curveball on that argument? Because he is a guy that does so much racing outside of Red Bull already, just weekend stuff in junior formulas. But you talk about some of the esports stuff he's done with Team Redline on iRacing. Not a lot of open wheel stuff, a lot of endurance racing. I think he's genuinely a guy that could feel right at home in the World Endurance Championship or in IMSA. And I think Max potentially knows he's got the potential to be a guy in contention for the Triple Crown.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess to counter that, he turns 26 next week, right? Like that's something I would see maybe 8 to 10 years down the road still. It's into the early 2030s. So, I mean, I think he's still got several years left in Formula One. He's certainly contractually bound at this point. Then again, Nico Rosberg signed an extension and then won the title and said, I'm out of here. So, I guess contracts are just nothing but pieces of paper these days. If you find the right clause in there, you can break them off. But I at least for the next several years, I think we're going to see Max Verstappen around here. And maybe he's not going to have as dominant of a car as he's got this year. Maybe Mercedes will be able to catch up and he and Lewis Hamilton can replicate that epic season we got a couple of years ago. That would certainly be more exciting for the fans than what we've gotten in the last couple of years. But I think Verstappen's here to stay for a while. Again, I don't necessarily know, but I buy into those comments 100%.
Tell you what, until 2026, if the regs are still good, Max will probably still be here. If not, go run elsewhere with Red Bull badging all over him until that contract expires.
No, that's fair. He's got nothing left to prove here, and he's going to be a triple world champion and top 5 already in wins. I mean, yeah, I certainly understand the argument, but again, that heated rivalry of Lewis. Maybe you want to surpass Lewis's wins record, which nobody ever thought Lewis would break Michael's record. Well, it's going to be very interesting several years here. We'll see.
In following this conversation between the two of you, I've jumped between both sides. Jackson says something and I agree with him, and then Ben says something and I agree with him. And it's just been a back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think that Max Verstappen, overall, his domination so far, when I think of the other drivers, the newer drivers that we've seen like Oscar Piastri and potentially Liam Lawson if he comes to Formula One permanently or full-time, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, I, in a way, feel bad for those drivers because as good as they are, I just feel like with the way Max is, if he doesn't decide to leave Formula One on his own, those drivers are never really going to get a chance.
And you want those guys to have their time in the sun.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, I feel like if he doesn't leave, they're not going to get a chance to be crowned world champion.
Well, and let me just say, things can change very quickly in this sport. It wasn't, go back 10 years. Sebastian Vettel was on a stretch of 4 consecutive world championships. He ended the 2013 season winning 9 races in a row. And then all of a sudden, Daniel Ricciardo gets in that Red Bull after Mark Webber retires. The regulations change, and Mercedes win all the 3 races that year. And 3 races that Red Bull do win, it's Ricciardo and not Vettel. So I think, Vettel looked like he was maybe going to be on that path to pass Schumacher's wins and championships record, and that ultimately didn't happen, and he moved to Ferrari and won several more races there, but he could never quite replicate that same level of success. So, Max is certainly doing everything right at the moment, but there are no guarantees in the sport. We know that much for sure.
Things can change real fast, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And now that we've gone off on this tangent, coming back to the grid ranking, we've got 6 drivers left. We have Max Verstappen, Alex Palou, Pecco Bagnaia, Jorge Martin, Brody Kostecki, and Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, next race weekend, we have MotoGP at Qatar, NASCAR at Talladega, and World Rally Championship in Jackson. I think it's time for our final segment of the show, our shining moment.
So I'll cover for Jackson here. So shining moment. If you're in the chat room, let us know your shining moment of the weekend. This is our bright moment of the week. So Ben, let's start with you. What's your shining moment?
Well, if I can just circle back to the grid ranking real quick, I think as we are doing with the World Drivers' Championship, I think we can just start putting Max's name on that trophy as well. I think, what did we say? Even if he DNFs every race, he's still somewhere in the 16-point range. So that's, I would think, not going to happen. So I think Max has a pretty good hand on that championship already as well in terms of grid ranking. But regardless, the shining moment for this weekend, it seems like such an easy answer, but I've got to give it to McLaren. To have both of their young drivers on the podium, and I believe, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, I think Matt White maybe put in our group chat the youngest average podium age in the history of Formula One. So, as much as we talk about how boring it's been with Lewis's dominance and Max's dominance and Seb's dominance before that, Michael's dominance before that, the youth movement in Formula One with some of these young drivers is great to see. And whether it's Max going off and winning a bunch more championships, or who I know people are fantasizing about these rumors that maybe Lando gets in that second Red Bull seat one day and can actually give Max a proper fight. But then again, we were saying the same thing about Checo when he was outperforming what that Force Indian Racing Point car could do. Max is just that good in a lot of respects. But to see McLaren in particular, based on where they were this year to where they are now, and Piastri especially, I mean, maybe the best rookie class since around the 2007 era when Lewis Hamilton nearly won the title as a rookie. Great to see that. Great to see them on the podium. That's my one shining moment for this weekend.
I agree with you, Ben. That's the same shining moment that I'm going to go with. Seeing McLaren, a double podium for them is just amazing. And Just their overall, the difference between the start of the season for them compared to where they are now and potential growth until the end of the season as well. I think it's really incredible to watch that and to watch both of the drivers grow. And as you mentioned, Lando Norris could really bring the heat to Max Verstappen one day if he is put into that Red Bull seat. But also, if Netflix is looking to start another Formula One show, I think maybe focusing on McLaren's journey might be something they're interested in. But now I'm going to pass this along to Joe for his shining moment.
My shining moment has to go to Juan Mir from MotoGP. What a race effort to have such a great race. 2020, the year of the pandemic, he goes out there through consistency. One race wins the MotoGP World Championship. The next year, things didn't go great. And then next thing you know, Suzuki decided we're out of MotoGP. He has put on such an effort with this Honda team to try to get it back towards the front. It looked like it was going to be another ride that just, okay, you're not going to see daylight towards the front. Today, it looked like the old Mir from back when he was in the championship contention in 2020. Great effort by that team. Marc Marquez looks strong too. We'll see what happens, but Repsol Honda, especially Juan Mir, did get my one shiny moment.
And I'm going to be following Ben and Isha's footsteps here because I got to give my shiny moment to Oscar Piastri. I said it throughout the episode. I just think that kid is so talented. I'm so impressed. He's a rookie. I don't think people understand that he is a rookie and is performing the way he is. And McLaren, they have really improved throughout the season. But Oscar Piastri's had so many impressive performances this year. And then to get a podium as a rookie, just very impressive. And I'm hopeful, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, that if this Red Bull domination comes to an end or anything, that McLaren can have a shot for a championship or something and maybe see Piastri go for it. I would love to see that. He's just so talented, I think.
It's more than Piastri being a rookie, Alex. It's this weekend being his first time ever at Suzuka, which is known by drivers as being one of the most challenging tracks. So I'm coming in on all you guys being a broken record, but I got to give mine to Piastri as well.
Piastri, great effort by him and the McLaren team. And of course, definitely we encourage everyone, if you enjoy all our programs, show your support for our team. Go to Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. If you're not watching us live, you see that thanks button. Click there. You want to give it to a particular member of the Grid Network team, you can do that. And of course, help us in 2024. Want to be in more tracks? Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew all invest in us each and every month. Plus, we're going to have some exciting announcements later on for our Patreon subscribers. So this is a good time. Invest in the Grid Network. And of course, we got a busy race weekend. We got Grid Encore tomorrow. Ben will be recapping the Xfinity race weekend. Then Grid tonight, going to be recapping all the week's news. Very exciting episode of that. And then we do this all over again. Grid Life pre-race and to wrap up next weekend. I'm Joe for Alex, Isha, Jackson, and Ben. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.